chair of this valedictory session, respected Professor Narhajji, respected Nagarajji, and well-wishers, followers, admirers of Shri Aurobindo, who have been attending and listening, churning, discussing about Shri Aurobindo's thought and Indian culture since yesterday. I have a big dilemma in talking in front of you. First dilemma is I'm neither a scholar or a thinker. Still, Mythic Society thought and gave me this privilege to speak before you. I'm just a journalist who is working for the cause of Bharat Mata. And as a part of that responsibility, incidentally, I am part of two important national level committees this year. One is, of course, the 75 years of independence, the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav Committee, under which my responsibility mainly is as an advisor to Prasar Bharati. But I'm fortunate enough to be part of Shri Aurobindo's 150th birth anniversary commemoration committee also. Incidentally, I was there at the ashram last week, and I could still feel that spirit and that existence of Shri Aurobindo at the Samadhi. Unfortunately, I could understand what Nagarajji was talking about, but unfortunately, I can't speak in Kannada. I'll continue in English. If you are comfortable, I can switch over in Hindi, whatever you want. But as I said, I'm not a scholar, and I'll be the last person to say that I have understood and digested Shri Aurobindo. You know, today is the Vyasa Purnima also. And in Sanskrit there is a ukti. Nagarajji was also talking about while referring to Shri Aurobindo. In Sanskrit there is a ukti, Vyasochistam Jagat Sarvam. There is nothing in this world that Maharshi Vyas hasn't touched. But in the modern context, if there is one person whom can be called as the Maharshi and who hasn't touched any aspect of existence, then in today's context we have to say Aurobindo Shishtam Jagat Sarvam. I'm going to take just 3 of his writings as a reference point. Incidentally, my grandfather was a great follower of Shri Aurobindo, and he was a close associate of Savarkar. It's a strange combination. And the first book that he introduced me of Shri Aurobindo was Divine Soul, which is perhaps the most highest level of consciousness, universal consciousness, if I have to use Shri Aurobindo's terminology. From individual consciousness to universal consciousness, if someone has to travel again and again, then Divine Soul is perhaps the book. After seeing the size and the language of Shri Aurobindo, I didn't dare at that age to revisit that. Then the mother gave me some window through the book on education. That was my real entry point. But as a student of political science and history, and who want to revisit history from Indian point of view, and who is also a journalist now, his editorials in Bande Mataram were the most attracting point for me, where he faced the sedition charges, and a revolutionary Shri Aurobindo was more appealing to me. Krantikari Aurobindo. You know, if you read the words and the language that he has used in Bande Mataram, and why and how Bande Mataram became a national slogan and national mantra, and the way he is comparing Bharat Mata to Bhavani, that reincarnation of Bharat Mata as a compassionate Saraswati kind of, to weaponize Durga kind of, that reincarnation of Bharat Mata is the unique interpretation of Bankim Chandra's text by Shri Aurobindo. And therefore, those editorials are very important. He called it as an organ of Indian nationalism. He didn't consider Bande Mataram as a newspaper. He said it is an organ of Indian nationalism. For him, journalism and nationalism were not two separate things. And therefore, when he writes absolute and complete independence as the aim of political action in India, it was a transformative statement, not just for the then Congress, who was essentially believing in dominion status, or not even dominion status, getting some kind of representation in the British administration. It was a complete departure of path. Many people talk about Lal Bal Pal. Yes, politically they were the faces. But if it is the philosophical foundation for that complete independence was given, it was given by Shri Aurobindo. That complete independence means what, for what, and how. That had to be interpreted in 1906, 7 and 8. Incidentally, Aurobindo is also delivering and then disturbing the entire Surat Congress incident and presidential speech. Unless we contextualize Shri Aurobindo as the father of Indian modern spiritual nationalism, we cannot understand and relocate or revisit him in the larger prism of Indian culture for the present day. His anger was against the imposed modernity of the West. And the best part is, the person who was kept away from this Indian culture deliberately, studied in Britain, completely educated in the British mindset, is challenging the entire Western prism of understanding Indian culture. I don't see this 75 years of independence and 150th anniversary of Shri Aurobindo's birth coming together on 15th of August this year as a mere coincidence. Again, if I have to use Shri Aurobindo's terminology, then there is some divine force behind this. And therefore, the second important text that I would like to refer, and I consider this as the most seminal work that Aurobindo has done for the real intellectual renaissance and decolonization of Indian mind. As I said, there is no aspect, whether education or literature or whatever, even for that matter, environment or gender relations, you will find some commentary by Shri Aurobindo. But if there is one seminal work that I have to pick up and revisit again and again, especially after 75 years of independence, then it is his seminal work of 30-volume Foundations of Indian Culture. Why that is important? See, please try and understand what has happened during the European colonization. I am not calling it British colonization deliberately. I am calling it European colonization. India or Bharat faced aggressions time and again. There were physical aggressions, there were religious aggressions. To some extent, we faced even the cultural onslaught. People got killed. Geographies got annexed. Even if we forget Shah and Hun, at least from Muhammad bin Qasim till Mughals, many parts of India got affected by that onslaught. Psychologically, society was shrinking, but the spirit to fight against this aggression never went away. Till then, for us, Islam was an external force difficult to understand because we never thought that religion can be an instrument of imposition. Initially, Europeans also came with the same kind of mindset, especially Portuguese. If somebody is telling you that Vasco da Gama came here for paper or spices, Vasco da Gama himself will not agree with that. Because as per the 1494 treaty, I don't know whether Mythic Society Library has that famous diary written by Vasco da Gama's companion called The First Voyage. It's a very interesting book, very interesting diary, written about the day-to-day account of Vasco da Gama since his starting to his going back to Portugal. Interestingly, he says, due to the 1494 Treaty of Thessaloniki, this was a treaty between Portuguese and Spain, mediated by the Pope. The earth was divided between East and West. The West was given to Spain, East was given to Portuguese. The first original land that he was excavating or rather exploring for occupation was the Arab land. There he got to know about India as a prosperous country, and he realized that most of the Arabs are actually trading with the southern part of India. There he realized that if you have to occupy Arab countries and take the message of Jesus there, then the real route goes via India. That's why he came to India. And I'm not saying no Mythic Society, no RSS publication, nothing. It's Vasco da Gama who is saying this. Otherwise, what was the reason that he came with weapons and missionaries together? He just had to do a trade. Why I am narrating this? Because Shri Aurobindo is the first person who is intellectually challenging these narratives. There is another myth created around this, that Vasco da Gama came to the court of Calicut. Who was the king there? Yes, who was the king there? What is the meaning of Zamorin? I am a Marathi speaking, you are a Kannada speaking. Even some Malayali speaking would not understand anything about Zamorin. Because as somebody said, his title was Samudri. Samudri, the protector of sea, the tax collector of sea. We were told that we didn't know maritime, we didn't know shipbuilding, and there was a king who was giving protection to entire trading route from Southeast Asia to West Asia. And everybody from Chinese to Arabs, everybody was paying taxes to Zamorin, so-called Zamorin. It was the Zamorin, that word is used by Portuguese because he was looking for a Christian king. And the name he assumed was Preston George. And what was his original name? None of us know. That dynasty is Manikvarman. That Manikvarman dynasty defeated Vasco da Gama in 3 months. He came in April, by September he had to flee because he evaded taxes. Nobody has told us this. And after that the persecution started. Wherever they went, they faced the resistance. And finally they were shrink to Goa. The same happened with French. The same happened with Dutch. The Battle of Kolachal by Martanda Varma was the first battle where one of the most important, powerful armed forces called Dutch was defeated by any Asian force. 1741. But we are told that we are a defeated race. We are a defeated nation. The attack was religious. We responded religiously. And therefore, in first almost 150 years, our slogan was Swadharma. They realized that, especially the British, that touching their religious sentiments is a dangerous game. It can boomerang. So they pulled out another instrument of economic exploitation. They started introducing new policies. Especially they realized that the basic resistance they are facing is in the forest areas. Wherever they went, our tribal brothers and sisters gave them such a befitting reply that they could never occupy any of India's forest land. So they came with a law called forest law. Seclude them. We are the mainstream people, so-called. They are secluded people. We are colonized minds. They are liberated minds. Now the irony is, after 75 years, we want to mainstream them. Why this is important? Because when these instruments change and the economy became the main instrument of exploitation or colonization, our response was Swadeshi. They realized that This is also not working completely because it is white man's burden. We have to civilize these people. They don't understand what is good or bad. They are not civilized enough. So they came out with the third instrument called education. Our response was Swabhasha and Rashtriya Shiksha, national education and mother tongue. Only in 1907 onwards, the idea of representation came. And in the response to that, we also propagated the idea called Swaraj. Swaraj was an instrument of political independence, but the real objective was Swadharma, Swadeshi, Swabhasha, Rashtriya Shiksha. Unfortunately, post-independent India in last 75 years only remembered 1857 to 1947, which was mainly struggle for Swaraj, and we completely whitewashed the struggle for Swadharma, Swadeshi and Rashtriya Shiksha. If somebody who is reminding this again and again and again, it is Shri Aurobindo. And therefore, the foundations of Indian culture, I consider, is the most seminal text. He actually divides this, it's a 30-volume thing. The 14th volume is the most precious volume. If somebody wants to get a gist of spiritual nationalism propagated by Shri Aurobindo, then 14 volume is sufficient. Like in Gita, they say, if you can't digest 18 adhyayas, then at least Bhakti Yoga or Karma Yoga, pick up 12th or 15th. Similarly, if you can't digest Shri Aurobindo completely or Foundations of Indian Culture, then at least revisit his 14th volume. He starts with the fundamental question, is India civilized? Remember, this was an intellectual response to the British historians who actually, or rather missionary historians who came up with this idea that they are in India to civilize India. And he completely dissects the idea of civilization and culture. And he fundamentally defines the real civilization is defined on the basis of objectives of the civilization and not the presentation of the civilization. And there he says, India is the only land where the objective of civilization is realizing the universal consciousness for everybody's good, while the so-called modernity imposed by West is at the most greatest happiness of the greatest numbers. And therefore, understanding this subtle definitional difference between what Britishers are calling as civilized, what you wear, what you produce, how many industries do you have? If those are the parameters of civilization, then Shri Aurobindo is challenging that. The next part is even more interesting because he is not a blind follower of whatever is Indian, and therefore he comes up with a unique thesis. And this thesis in 5 long chapters called Rationalistic Critique of Indian Culture. Rationalistic Critique of Indian Culture. And there he comes up with an interesting argument where he says that the problem is not whether we have a modern kind of democracy or not. The problem is not whether we have an organized, industrialized life or not. The problem is not about the social structures that we had, where as per the parameters of the West or not. The real problem lies in two issues. One, imbalance between the spiritual and material. And forgetting about the first part, that what are the real objectives of our civilization. So his critique is not based on he is writing in English, but he is seeing the reality from Indian perspective. He said we have forgotten the fact that this is the land where Vidya and Avidya are equally revered. Material and spiritual are equally revered. They are not seen as dichotomous, opposite to each other. They are complementary to each other. So that's why this rationalistic critique is very important, because that is relevant even today. We are either too materialistic or we have false imagination about being too spiritualist. And therefore, his defense of Indian culture based on religion and spirituality is the next section. Then he comes to Indian art, culture, Indian polity. He deals with various issues. But for me, there is an interesting aspect in the last volume of this series that is called the Renaissance in India. Now, unfortunately, we have developed this habit of identifying ourselves based on, and I'm very much aware that I'm talking in Bengaluru with Kannada as a language, state language. But still I'm making this statement that if there is one biggest folly of post-independent India, which is the biggest symbol of colonized thinking, is linguistic identity. And I'm making this very responsibly. And it's not only me. When this discussion was going on, right from Rajendra Prasad to Dr. Ambedkar, everybody warned about this. RSS Sarsang Chalak Golwalkar Gurji warned about this. Language or religion as an identity is a European construct. I speak German, that's why I'm German citizen. I speak French, therefore I'm a French citizen of France. Identifying yourself, tell me, before independence, didn't we have Kannada as a language flourishing? Or Marathi or Tamil or Telugu or Assamese or Gujarati or whatever? Perhaps we had many more languages than this, many more dialects than this. Some of you are historians, professional historians, and I'm challenging this because at least for last 2-3 years, I'm going through documents, each and every document of the colonial archives, wherever it's possible. And at least during the European colonization, I didn't find a single instance where we have fought each other on the basis of language. Language is not at all an identity. You give me one single instance. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj kingdom was from Pune to Tanjavur. Prakrit Marathi, Telugu, Kannada, Tamil, Tulu, Malayalam, all speaking people are there. His Ajna Patra is there, where he is saying after every 20 miles, there has to be interpreter. Every order passed from here should be interpreted in the local language. State had that much of role to play in language. Otherwise, language was just a means of communication. For us, all Indian languages were national languages. Sanskrit was a mother language. There was no issue of conflict. Tell me, now we make this, blunderous argument of connecting language, and that's why we are speaking to each other in English. When Adi Shankaracharya traveled from Calicut to Shardapit, what was the connecting language of India? Was there English to communicate with each other? How did he travel from Shardapit to Banaras, Banaras to Haridwar? He made Shastrartha there. What was his language? There was a bridge language for intellectuals called Sanskrit. There was a language of communication at every local level. You know very well, I know very well. Many a times, southern Karnataka person talking to each other from Mysore region, Belgaum person will not understand his Kannada fluently. Or close to Kolhapur, is somebody speaking Marathi, I come from northern Maharashtra, his Marathi I won't pick up. Certain words I will understand, that I understand in Kannada also, because most of them are Sanskrit words. The Renaissance has been assigned to Bengal, and a Bengali Maharshi who is challenging that. Shri Aurobindo says, this seeing us from dark age to modern age itself is a Western prism. And therefore, the so-called Renaissance in India cannot be based on the idea of imposed modernity. You have been listening to many aspects of Shri Aurobindo's thought, especially on foundations of Indian culture. I can keep talking. This is one of my favorite areas. But I want to come to his third reference point, because that is again most relevant for us today and for coming days. That is his speech just before independence, where he actually talks about his 8 dreams. Tiruchirappalli radio station broadcast that speech on 14th August 1947. And there he is actually visualizing what Bharat's role should be. Not just dreaming in the past or celebrating the independence, but for the future. This speech is landmark in many ways. One is, of course, he is talking about his, again, the coincidence that we are going to witness this year on 15th of August. 75 years ago, there was another coincidence that India's independence and Shri Aurobindo's 75th birthday was on the same day. And he is making this interesting speech. Then that is this speech that makes the foundation. Bande Mataram being a mantra of a revolution, foundations of Indian culture, unraveling the idea of spiritual nationalism. Then this third reference point that I am taking is actually charting out the future strategy. Now we have attained political independence, then what? Setting the objectives of new, free, independent India. That is this speech, which is the most neglected one in our policy parameters. The first interesting point that Shri Aurobindo makes, and please, I'm quoting these words deliberately. I don't want to miss out on anything. August 15th, 1947 is the birthday of Free India. It marks for her the end of an old era, the beginning of a new age. But we can also make it by our life and acts as a free nation an important date in a new age, opening for the whole world, for the political, social, cultural, and spiritual future of humanity. Bharat has a role to play for humanity. This person is envisioning, deeply rooted in the idea of spiritual nationalism and his understanding of Indian culture. He talks about his dreams, and he doesn't forget. He is a Maharshi. He left all the political activities, settled there in Aurobindo Ashram, in Pondicherry. But he says, revolutionary movement which would create a free and unified India was my first dream. Now India today is free, but she has not achieved unity. We should never forget this. His first pain while celebrating independence is the partition. And again, I want to ask this question to every thinking mind. Shri Aurobindo, as I said, was an intellectual force behind entire new movement that we saw within Congress, which then popularly known as Vande Mataram movement or Vangabhanga movement. Only one piece of land was divided of Bengal on religious lines. Now there are people who say, if some people want to go away, let them go away. If Kashmir is divided, so what? Why people of India stood up when nobody in Congress was ready to take this challenge? Lal Bal Pal came as new leadership. Did anybody call Lala Lajpat Rai as a Punjabi? Did anybody call Tilak as a Brahminical Maharashtrian guy? Did anybody call Bipin Chandra Pal as somebody Bengali? Why these three leaders were accepted? Why Shri Aurobindo's editorials were popular? Entire India erupted, irrespective of language or religion. 436 secret societies were working. British documents prove that. Entire Anushilan Samiti was coordinating this activity throughout India. Within 6 years, we forced Britishers not just to take back the decision of partition, but to change their capital from Kolkata to Delhi. What happened in next 36 years? That not just Bengal, but Punjab, Mumbai, everything got divided, and we accepted the partition. That is the pain of Shri Aurobindo. First religious partition that India resisted as India, where did that resistance go? That is his pain. And therefore, again and again, he is reminding that don't forget this. Unified India is a geocultural destiny for the world. Many people do not understand this idea of geocultural identity of our nationhood. It is not about religion. Come on. Panini is not about geography. Sharda Pit is not about geography. Ravi is not about geography. Sindhu is not about geography. It's this nation's geocultural identity. That getting divided is this nationhood getting divided. The idea of India getting weakened. And lastly, I just want to make one point and why we need to revisit Aurobindo from spiritual nationalist point of view. there is basically, even today, there is a contestation about three ideas of India. This has been my thesis. I can go on talking about Shri Aurobindo's dreams, but I know you have been listening since yesterday and a valedictory session. So I have to limit myself. I'm already touching the time assigned by the organizers. So I'll make just last point. There are three contesting ideas of India that are being debated intellectually even today. That was rooted in independence struggle, but there Shri Aurobindo is most relevant. That's why I'm referring to them. There is first idea of India that was proposed, or that is rather imposed by British. Unfortunately accepted by the Congress, especially Nehru. And he used it even in his first speech on 15th of August or midnight. That India is a nation in the making. In a way, accepting the fact that we were not a nation, it is the British who initiated this process, and that's why we had this sense of nationalism. My simple question is, and I ask this, I'm a student of JNU, and I asked this to one of my teachers also. If before British coming here, there was no India or idea of India, why did Portuguese call their company as Portuguese East India Company? If there was no India before British, why didn't they call it Bengal, Portuguese Bengal Company, or Portuguese Calicut Company, or Portuguese? They didn't see us as a citizen of Calicut or citizen of Bengal. They saw us as India. The same is about French East India Company. The same is about Dutch India Company. And same is about East India Company, British East India Company. If there was no India, why there was a company named after India? Simple logical question. But unfortunately, the so-called founder of modern India accepted this premise that India was not there and we have to make India. And in making this India, we adopted a model called socialism, secularism, and linguistic identities. All the three borrowed concepts from Europe. The second contestation came from the communist side. Though they started this from 25 itself, but 1942 they articulated it in a very systematic fashion, which eventually became the foundation for creation of Pakistan also. That India was never a nation, India can never be a nation, India is a conglomeration of nationalities. So Tukde Tukde is not a new thing. It's a 1942 resolution of communists. That India consists of, some say 18, some say 25, but basically different identities, and eventually they will break up. Or they have to break up. But there was a third force that has been existing in India since time immemorial, that saw Bharat as a geocultural Rashtra from Himalayas to Indian Ocean. That saw a continuum, not just geographical but cultural. That saw Ganga as Ganga and Rameshwaram as Rameshwaram. That saw Kashi as Kashi and Jyotirlingas as Jyotirlingas. All that thought, traveling from time immemorial to Chanakya, to every time and again, whether Shankaracharya, whether entire Bhakti movement, whether Shivaji, to, in the modern times, Before that, of course, Swami Vivekananda made his own contributions. But in modern times, in terms of nationalism, if somebody has re-articulated this indigenous idea of modern nationalism, that India is a continuous civilizational legacy with a strong idea of spiritual nationhood, that is Shri Aurobindo. And because this idea is being challenged again and again intellectually, we got the political independence, but now the battle is for decolonizing our intellect. The battle is for decolonizing our economic and social political structures. Unless our minds are independent of Western paradigms and prism, we cannot reconstruct Bharat on its civilizational edifice that will be able to guide and lead the world for a balanced prosperity, peace. The idea of righteousness exemplified through a moral power, not just military or economic power. First time we have shown that to the world through our vaccine diplomacy. We distributed more than 2,400 million vaccines to 101 countries without any expectation from them. That was asserting of a moral authority. India proposed one idea, first time ever since Second World War it has happened, that India proposed one idea of International Day for Yoga. 177 countries jointly proposed the resolution, which was unanimously passed by each and every nation. First time ever without any difference of opinion or veto, such a resolution is passed. Thirdly, when the Solar Alliance was to be created, unanimously it was decided, 133 countries proposed that India should be the headquarter. This is the idea by the Indian government and Indian Prime Minister, and that's why Solar Alliance has to be stationed in India. If alternative energy sources grabbed as the Suryopasana, the idea that was conceived, it is the land of Bharat, and that's why it has to be recognized. This is just a beginning. I believe that this divine force is working in the right direction. We are rediscovering ourselves as an old civilization for the modern world. The challenge is that Shri Aurobindo has posed before us of accepting this as the intellectual challenge of soldiers who are ready to fight this war for Mother India, so that she can enlighten the world with this eternal idea of spirituality and universal consciousness. I just wish this endeavor by Mythic Society will enable us, enlighten everybody, and take us together for, because we know how to manage. We never considered our diversity as differences. Many people say, we have diverse cultures. Sorry. We don't have diverse cultures. We have a unique culture that celebrates diversity. We have a unique idea of managing differences and taking them to a new kind of synthesis. There was Advaita and Advaita, and still we found Dvaita Advaita. That is the beauty of Bharat. Even Catholics and Protestants couldn't do that. They had to come out with a fake idea called tolerance to tolerate each other. We have Shaivites and Vaishnavites, and still we know how to respect atheists. That beauty of Bharat has to enlighten the world. In future, if it is peace, prosperity and moral power that is to be demonstrated as a model to entire world, there is no other option but for India to awaken. That was Shri Aurobindo's ultimate dream. I hope our efforts will lead to that direction. May Bharat Mata give us that strength. Namaste.